Okay, well, I'm here to talk about uh, sound and crystals and consciousness and vibration as the illusion of separation, that we're all connected. And like I was saying about balancing theory and practice, that uh, experience without theory is blind, theory without experience is just mental. And we have a joke. I taught music for many years, and there would be people that come in, they want to understand everything and know why. And they would understand it all, but they couldn't really do anything. And so we have a joke in the music world that the difference between theory and practice is that in theory, there's no difference. So in practice, I been very busy, built a building that is amazing, and it's soundproof. It's shielded from all EMFs. It's a pyramid. Here's just a little example of another day at the office for me. And these are Vogel crystals on the table, and there's lights that flash behind them. All the instruments are laid out in precisely measured sacred geometry. Crystals are programmed for different functions and put in the bowls on top of the person and around the person because everything is vibration. It's important to understand how this information is stored and the effect it can have on us because you are an information storage device. So can you reboot your biological cellular memory or upgrade your outdated programs? Well, that's kind of the nature of my work. Okay, here's some more theory, right? Niels Bohr, who developed the first successful model of the atom, says everything we call real is made of things that can't be regarded as real. Pretty theoretical. Uh, so because everything is a wave, and waves are not what something is, waves are what something does. So let me talk about some of the properties of waves. Um, Waves transfer energy, right? The hand moves up and down, the wave moves over to the right, but when it hits the wall, it transfers the energy to the wall. If the wall is hard, it's just going to reflect the wave back. If it's soft, if the wall's made of jello, it's just going to transmit that information and that energy into the wall. So waves transfer energy. The whole function of waves is to transfer energy, right? That's what they do. And interestingly, harmonic content is the overtones that exist above a fundamental pitch. And all these overtones fall into a regular mathematical pattern. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But still, one of the things about waves is resonance. And everyone's heard that term, but here's a good diagram. If you're unfamiliar, you can see the peaks of the waves at the left add together and it doubles the amplitude. So it's twice as loud, twice as bright, twice as strong. But if the peak and the trough add together, it gets zero. And that's how your noise canceling headphone work. There's a little microphone. It takes the sound from out there, inverts the phase so it cancels out the sound from outside. Here's a great example of resonance. This Tacoma Narrows Bridge back in the 40s, it's the resonance of the bridge just happens to be the same as the resonance of the channel where the wind blows through, like blowing over the top of a bottle. And it just kept adding and adding.
These are some of the most amazing pictures ever recorded by a newsreel. The actual collapse of the world's third largest suspension bridge. Only a 35-mile-an-hour wind is blowing, but this apparently sets up a rhythmic swinging of the bridge, which increases with each swing. Finally, the swinging road and the suspension cables give way and plunge into the water below. Fortunately, the only casualties were a car stalled on the bridge and a dog.
So resonance, one of the other properties of waves are entrainment. And Christian Huygens back in the 1600s noticed that all the cuckoo clocks, they started random in the morning, but by the end of the day, they're all swinging together because one would swing and it would click, and that click would hit the other one, and the other one would absorb that energy, and eventually they all synchronize together. So any two vibrating bodies will entrain if they're exposed to each other for long enough. Of course, your body is filled with these rhythmic cycles, and they're constantly entraining your brain, your heart, your breath, your lungs, and every vibration in the universe is constantly entraining in a similar fashion as our bodies. So the universe is listening to itself to conserve energy and to create greater coherence. Of course, brain waves can also be entrained with music. And in fact, the higher the skill of musician, the more the brain waves of the audience synchronize with the performer. So that's pretty interesting. Along with that, similarly, is mirror neurons is another way to synchronize your brain waves is that when you do something and someone sees you do it, it it triggers the same neurons inside their brain as the person taking the action. So, personally, I love to go to the beach and see little kids playing in the sand, just filled with joy. And it just makes me feel so good. I hate watching videos where people are falling off wheelbarrows and doing things like that. So those are mirror neurons. Now, Johannes Kepler, who discovered the orbits of the planet, says that they're not arbitrary, but depend on musical necessity because everything is vibrating. They're all in training, but they're in training in the same way that music does. So the most common fallacious view of our solar system, all the planets going around the sun, it's not quite like that. Really, the sun is flying through space, dragging the planets with them, creating this vortex. And it looks just like the harmonic series. And so uh, the difference is the sound of the solar system would be about 30 to 40 octaves below the threshold of human hearing. But it's a useful analogy to understand the connection of space, time, and sound. Okay, here's the whole spectrum of vibrations. On one side, 1 cycle per second. The other side, well, atomic, very fast. So we can hear from about 20 cycles per second up to 20,000. After that, you get into ultrasound, right, where they'll use those high frequency sound waves to find the fetus of the body and all that kind of stuff. Keep going, and it gets into heat and light. Now, light, you can only see 1 octave of light, but you can hear 10 octaves of sound. So sound is important. Now, if we push all that over, instead of cycles per second, now the zero crossing point over to the left, we have seconds per cycle. And that would be like the waves of the planets over time, right? Saturn is 1 billion seconds per cycle. So Robert Grant developed this quaternion math that demonstrated how the musical scale aligns with the constants of nature and prime numbers. And this is very interesting work. It's a little more technical than we can discuss here, but you can go to Robert's site and learn all about that. So in Don Conroe, the Grand Gong Master, he simplified things and said, the entire universe is a gong. And I said, Don, yeah, I know you really like gongs, but the universe as a gong might be a little much. But, well, turns out that helioseismology shows that the sun rings just like a gong. And the, the magnetic field of the sun and the electromagnetic field, these are magnetosonic waves that transfer out from the center of our solar system, from the sun, and create all these patterns. So patterns are the means by which information is conveyed. And so we don't use magnetic tape anymore, but we used to. And how that works is there's all these little metal particles on the tape, and sound comes in, and there's a little gap in the circuit, and the metal particles conduct across that gap, and it makes a pattern, and that pattern stores the information of the sound. Of course, if you want to erase the pattern, you can use a bulk tape eraser, and it will re-randomize all of that. So enough theory, and now back to more practical parts. So I have been using these bowls for a long time. I've been racing things for, I don't know, 45 years. And this big bowl sat on somebody's knees for about 40 sessions. And then I was recorded it, then I erased it. And the same thing with the smaller bowl sat on somebody's heart for about 40 sessions, and then I erased it. And so here's the large bowl beforehand, and you can see if there's its amplitude is the vertical and frequency is horizontal. So the lower left is the low notes, the high notes are to the right. Loudness is top and bottom. So if there's such a thing as a beautiful curve, the bottom, after it has been erased, is really much more aesthetically pleasing. But what does it sound like? Well, excuse me, the the top, you can see that there's more bass sound stored in the bowls, but it's as if it stole it from the higher frequencies. If you look, the bottom one is after it's been erased, there's much more high frequencies there. The bowl sounds more clear, more pure. So what's going on? How's that work? Well, remember I said how waves transfer energy. So energy of the bowl has been transferred to the person, but likewise, energy of the person was transferred back to the bowl. So it's really important if you're using these bowls on, even around people, that they do get erased every once in a while. Now, here's the smaller bowl. Same thing. You can see that there's more bass, and the top one before it's erased, there's some high notes that aren't even there that are in the lower one. So that's a practical application. Now, let me talk about crystals a little bit. Crystals are transducers, and transducer just changes energy from one form to another. You know, the bridge of my guitar back here, there's little crystals underneath the bridge that translate those vibrations into electricity so I can plug it in and play. Anyway, and that's what this picture up at the top left is kind of explaining how those crystal transducers work. But crystals can also resonate with extreme precision. Now, this little diagram at the right, I had one of these when I was a kid. This is the crystal radio, and you just move that, you can tune in different stations. So crystals can receive and they can transmit, they can amplify a signal, and they can store information. So there's a great movie on YouTube called A Century of Crystalography. And it is all about how things are crystals. And, you know, many people in the New Age movement will talk about evolving into your crystal body as if somehow, like a butterfly, they're going to, I don't know, pupate into a crystal being where really your body is filled with crystals already. All your vitamins are crystals. Things are there, all the proteins are forms of crystals. And so look at this movie, it'll explain how all the components of your body are actually crystals. You already are a crystal being.
Crystals have lots of planes, parallel sheets of atoms that repeat regularly. They go from top to bottom, left to right, front to back, and through all the possible diagonals in between. Lawrence's genius was to recognize that each spot on the Lowy photographs was a single reflection from each set of these crystal planes.
So they use X-ray crystallography to determine the internal atomic structure of the crystals, and which is very useful. And I remember when I first started studying crystals long ago, I was watching this old World War II movie, and this American, it's in black and white, hands something to someone in the French resistance, and he says, "Here, take this crystal and we'll be in communication." Because crystals were a critical part of the war effort during World War II because they can resonate so precisely. It allowed people to communicate to their radios to tune into the exact same frequency. And there is really a movie called Crystals Go to War. And if you're interested in crystals, this will tell you all about how that works. It's very interesting. But crystals have been used way, way longer. This is a picture of uh, an Egyptian healer with a basket full of crystals. Now, there's texts called lapidary medical texts that talk about how to use crystals for medical purposes. And there's a Mesopotamian lapidary in cuneiform. There's a medieval one. So crystals has just been used for thousands of years, and there's a lot of recorded information about that. But like Abraham Lincoln says, not everything on the internet is true. And you can find 20 ways to cleanse and charge your crystals, but there's zero evidence for any of that that I have observed. So, being an evidence kind of guy, I did a study on methods to store and delete information in crystals. And I use a gas discharge visualization device to pass a voltage through the crystal. And uh, what I did, there's a protocol for storing information in the crystals. And then I'd use several different methods to erase the crystals. And uh, as the voltage went through the crystal, it made this little 10-second movie. And then I used specialized software to analyze that, the area, the intensity, and the entropy of the light. And uh, the data was graphed and compared. And most interestingly, everything was less. There was less area, there was less intensity, but there was also less entropy. And so the two graphs here are the same information graphed in different ways. The one at the top, you can see the top two lines is no information is in the crystal. And the two lines right underneath that, information is stored in the crystal. So I could show that I could store information in the crystal and I could delete information from the crystal. If you want to see how to do that, you can just download that from my website. Happy to share that with you. So there was one time where I neglected to follow one of the protocols in storing the information in the crystal. And so we graph that compared to every other time in the crystal. You can see it still had an effect, but not as strong an effect. So it just demonstrated the efficacy of the protocol that I have. So I could show that information is stored in arrays. There was a decrease in the area, the intensity, and the entropy. Entropy is the randomness. So less light was transmitted through the crystal, but it was more organized. And so my theory is electrons flow in a circle around the atomic lattice, and that creates a magnetic field. And so it's called a ring current, and ring currents are common at every scale in nature. This is a graphic representation of the magnetic fields created by ring currents. And so I have to ask, can the orientation of these fields store information in a similar fashion as the orientation of the metal particles on tape? And I think so. So this is another graphic demonstration of how the magnetic fields are created, and the ring currents in the hexagonal rings of crystals and water store information, because quartz crystals are this hexagonal lattice, and the water in every living cell is formed into hexagonal rings. And so it can store information in the same way that crystals can. Remember about your crystalline body? So every water in every living cell is structured into hexagonal rings. And Luc Montagnier, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the AIDS virus, studied the properties of structured water in relationship to DNA. And he took a DNA sample and diluted it and spun it in a vortex and diluted it 10-to-1 and spin it in a vortex again, and kept doing that until after many dilutions, there's not even one molecule in the original sample. But he could measure an electromagnetic signal in the water, transmitted that signal from his laboratory in Paris to a university in Italy. There, the signal, they played that into water for an hour. So Luke refers to this signal as music. and the water is shielded from all other frequencies while listening to that music, which is the same reason why my room is all shielded. So they added, after the water listens to the music for an hour, they add some nucleotides to it and put it in a polymerase chain reaction machine. And uh, the polymerase is an enzyme that replicates DNA. And it somehow receives information from the music that was played into the water and it reconstructs the DNA. And when compared to the original, the newly constructed DNA is over 98% accurate. Wow, right? Amazing. And so most people are familiar with Dr. Emoto's work showing how he can put his thoughts and feelings into water and freeze it, and it makes these different patterns. So the human body is mostly water, right? But by volume, 65, 70%, but by number of molecules, your body is 99% water. And it's in those crystalline forms. And so our thoughts and feelings inform the water in our cells. And the cells actually make a sound. And we can listen to the sounds of cells with this atomic force microscope. And it's called sonocytology. And we're going to listen to some of these sounds. Baker's yeast, plant buds. Now we can take those sounds and put them in a cymoscope so that we can actually visualize those sounds in water. And here are the sounds of a healthy cell and the sounds of a cancer cell. And so I have to wonder if we can put this sound that creates these healthy cells back in, if that can't maybe reverse some of these other conditions that people have. Well, here's the sound of a handpan in this cymoscope. And I have to wonder, what would it feel like if 99% of the cells in your body were doing that? Sorry, 99% of the molecules in your body were doing that. Anyway, so information is stored in the structured water of our cells, and that informs our DNA. Well, DNA is the program of our form and development. It's the information of who we are and how we show up in the world. But where did this program come from? How did it come to be? How can we change it? Well, let's talk about water for a little minute. This image shows the relative amounts of water on the Earth. All the water on the Earth, uh, the, although it covers 71% of the surface, it's only a very thin film, right? If the Earth was a polished metal sphere, 12 inches in diameter, the condensation of your breath would be deeper than the deepest ocean if you just breathed on it. And so the largest sphere here, 860 miles, it includes all the water, oceans, ice caps, lakes, rivers, atmosphere, people, everything, everywhere, underground, 860 miles. The smaller one over Kentucky is 170 miles in diameter. And it's all the fresh water, which includes the groundwater, the water in dogs, everything, all the water that's fresh water. And 99% of this volume comes from groundwater, which is not accessible to humans. And so this tiny little dot over Atlanta that's 35 miles in diameter is all the fresh water in the lakes and rivers. All the water that we need every day comes from this little dot, 35 miles in diameter. Now, the Great Lakes look like they hold a lot more fresh water, but they're not that deep. So this tiny little bubble is what sustains all the life on Earth. So since 99% of the molecules in our body are water, and that water informs our DNA, like Luke refers to it as music, right? The music of the water in your cells talking to your DNA. Consciousness and life as we experience it is transduced through water. How's that transduced? Well, DNA emits biophotons that connects and coordinates all your biophysical processes throughout your body. Oh, and the Buddhist Kala chakra of the map kind of looks like those diagrams, doesn't it? So the skilled use of sound, light, and crystals can modulate the water and delete old stored information. And of course, Einstein said everything's energy. You just have to match that energy, and it creates the reality that you want. And so, since energy is mass times the speed of light squared, energy and mass are equivalent. And so you can calculate a wave function for any object. In one of my physics class, I remember calculating the wave function of a Volkswagen Beetle driving down the freeway. Well, Andre Linde, the famous physicist, calculated the wave function of the entire universe. And when he calculated it, it turned out to be zero. And in order for the wave function of the universe not to be zero, you have to remove the mass of the observer. And this kind of goes to the quantum idea of just by observing something, you change it. By observing it, you create it. Maybe, but we know that if you did not observe the universe, it would not exist for you. So uni of the universe, uni means one, and verse is song. So the universe is just one song. And Ken Wilber, famous psychologist and philosopher, said that there are no boundaries in the universe. Boundaries are illusions and the products not of what's real, but just how we map and edit our reality. So what's the boundary of the sun? Is it the surface of the sun? Is it the corona of the sun? Is it the heat of the sun? Is it the light of the sun? If that's it, the boundary of the sun would be across the galaxy, outside the galaxy. The same with what is the boundary of my body? Is it my physical body? Is it the magnetic field of my heart that reaches out? Is it my brain waves connecting to other people? There are no boundaries in the universe. It is just one big song. And on the left, here's the cosmic web, shows all the galaxies connected by filaments of plasma. And on the right is the human brain neural network connecting all your neurons. And it's like the same thing. So I have to ask, does the self-similarity of the largest and smallest things point to the existence of non-local consciousness? Now, in the Vedas, which is the oldest book on earth, says that consciousness is the one substance that everything is made from. And Erwin Schrödinger, who developed the wave equation for the electron, said the total number of minds in the universe is one. And not only is there just one single consciousness, but that consciousness is not separate from the objects experienced within that consciousness. And so Gerald Pollack showed that water is structured by sound and light and vortex motion. And Luc Montagnier transduced DNA into water from a distant and remote location. Well, the sun is oscillating through the galaxy. There's the wave of the sun with a frequency of 70 million years going up and down through the galaxy. And there's the harmonic motion of the solar vortex of the planets spinning around the sun, creating this sound that is well below the threshold of hearing. But it's a wave transmitting information and energy. On Earth, the spin of the Earth causes all the oceans to spin in the north. This is the North Pacific Gyre, right? So water is structured by sound, light, and vortex motion, which begs the question, if water has a memory and is activated by sound and light and vortex motion, is it possible that the sound of the wind and the sunlight and the lightning that the gyres of the ocean from the spin of the earth and the planetary vortex, are these affecting water in an unforeseen way? Is it transducing the interference patterns of vibration, creating the music of the primes and all the constants of nature? Are we the manifestation of multidimensional harmonic resonance from the movement and the impingement of all these waves on Earth's water? Well, maybe. So if you're ever in Southern California, I invite you to come down, have a tour, see the place. It's a lot of fun. I'm teaching a workshop, a couple more workshops, just had one the other day.